Hello, Jonathan.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I am very glad to hear that. Let me make this screen a little larger. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Where are we? We are in Dini. All right. All right. Yes. I'll wait another few minutes if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem.
Um, so talk to me, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, same old. It's getting warmer here. Spring is coming early.
Yeah, I can't. I can't wait. I'm not made for summer.
Um, what's summertime? It's hot and humid.
I mean, I can't handle winter. So I can't wait for summer. Like
No,
I,
oh, I got you. I got you. You can't handle winter. What's winter like there?
it's actually not so bad in Jerusalem, or generally speaking. In Israel, we don't get snow too often, but just like just it's probably from a child. I think I've been traumatized. Like I remember walking once home from school. I don't know. I was probably like in second grade or third grade, and my coat was like it's pouring rain and there's like drips of water coming down from the head of my coat, and I was just like I can't stand being in this state right now, or sitting on a bus and like you're sitting at the one window that's broken and like water is still like coming inside. It's just being in the rain is not great. And now as someone that's in the building industry, rain is just water damage, leaks.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep,
I'm
yep.
always
Being
and
a
sorry, go ahead.
homeowner, being a homeowner, it gives you a new perspective on water.
Right, how powerful it is, and like
Destructive.
how powerful, how destructive. And
Mm-hmm.
in Israel, it's the joke is like the contractors over here are always like you'll come and point out where is this water damage from. So you have to understand. Last winter it didn't rain, so like the wall expanded. Now that's why there's water. Okay, and if it's like this summer there was tons of rain. There's always an excuse. It's never like water's on a break or just do it. Water just
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but on the other hand, it's very inspiring how powerful water is and how powerful the elements in our world are. Um, again, it is a little weird that Israel is like very good at keeping missiles out from hitting people's homes, but like as far as like keeping water out, that's just like above their pay grade. They haven't managed to figure that out. Um, this week, when we're going to go over these judicial systems, the laws of just society, dinim. Um, just like last week, this one's also like a little dry with regards to the run through, which is okay. It is what it is at the end of the day. Sandy wrote to me a message earlier this week, like just about. It was more about I think her her disillusion with how the court systems and governments work around the world right now. So I don't know how much we're going to get to salvation or an answer in this class, but hopefully hopefully we can explain some of that. Um, all right, I think we'll jump in, and then whoever joins.
Sure thing.
All right. Can I ask you to read the few sources we have from where we derive this law, Jonathan?
Yeah, sure. So, Exodus, I shall judge between a man and his neighbor. I shall make known to them the statutes of God and his teachings.
Right. So here we're just seeing something more general, which is just God is the judge, right? And we're talking about where he will let us know about these statutes of God and these teachings, but still fairly vague. Let's continue.
So you shall seek out from all the people men of ability, God-fearing men of truth, who hate improper gain, and place over them princes out of thousands, princes out of hundreds, princes out of fifties, and princes out of tens, and let these judge the people at all times.
So now we broke it down a little more, right? And we're now bringing men into this, and they have to be God-fearing. They need to be men of truth. They hate improper gain, right? So there's like a lot already packed into those three things off the bat, right? The fact that they like truth, that's like a carpet category to really get you rid of all things that are untrue, right? As far as they not only are not interested in improper gain, they hate proper gain, right? So this antithetical to the way they look at the world. And God-fearing, also another carpet term, because any behavior that would be considered not God-fearing, clearly this person is not relevant, right? And then we go through a system of really trying to weed out the best of the best, so to speak, from our groupings.
And then judge fairly the needy and the orphan, vindicate the poor and the impoverished, rescue the needy and destitute, and deliver them from the hand of the wicked.
All right, so aside from things that would be, let's say, the prerequisite, which you would say, and again, we're speaking. Hello, Sandy. Good to have you with us. We were just reading through the verses right now. We just read through the first two verses, and as we read through them, we see that we're zooming in more and more. The last verse over here from Psalms, in theory, you're in a place where there's other governments. I mean, there's other kings out there in the world, and they're doing their thing. And like, we get it. Like, we can't let people be killing people, and we can't allow people stealing. But at the end of the day, that's just sort of on the any Hollywood movie we see, and we're taken back to old England, right? We're seeing most people are living a very horrible life, and there's still some sort of sense of general justice. Here we're being told and we're being stressed that it needs to be fairly for the needy and the orphan, right? The poor, the impoverished. So if it's obvious that the lords and the influential people of society are being taken care of, here the focus is that this really happens when you're making sure that all people of society are being taken care of as well. Antonio, it's good to have you with us. Hello, sir.
How's it going?
All right. I'm doing well, thank God. Okay, we're going to take, I'm trying to think if we should just jump into this, or should we just give like a little context? So as far as dinim, these just laws that we're going to go into right now, these are things that we discussed in the intro, but that seems like a million years ago. So just as a small reminder that according to Maimonides, the Rambam, right? So the purpose of the commandment of establishing these legal systems is to deal with, as in this seventh commandment, is for us to create these court systems and this legal system so we could deal with the people violating the other six we just reviewed. Right, so that's what's important for Maimonides. As far as the Ramban, Nachmanides, this is really to establish a legal system that will deal with the six, but more generally, all the aspects of human society and proper functioning for the Noahides. Right, so it's also the king, also the governance, but everything else they need to do. So with regards to Maimonides, you need to have your Noahide sage deal with your Noahide rulings, but with regards to things that don't fall under that rubric, go speak to your local judge. With regards to Maimonides, this is fully all-encompassing. And just because we're doing this in 2024, very briefly, because we're obviously not there, and I'll preface this by saying this is Jacob's channel, and Israel is not the biblical Israel yet, and the days of Messiah hopefully are soon upon us, but we're not there yet. And the state of Israel is definitely not the complete manifestation of the prophecies of our prophets. Regardless, though, I would say that even though the legal system in Israel is a secular system and it derives its principles, and this is something that you were asking about, Sandy, a little in your question, but from the common law, just general common law that we share with the British and the Canadian and the American, of course, and the Ottoman system that was still in place in Israel. However, it is influenced by the Hebrew law as well. And there is Justice Menachem Alon, very famous justice. His son was a teacher of mine, also a great rabbi that unfortunately got into some inappropriate sexual scandals. But also, it is what it is. Nevertheless, that was I digress. So he decided, or his opinion was, that it was established that the values of the states of Israel are those of a Jewish and democratic state. Having said that, Jewish is first, which gives it its interpretive precedence as far as adoption of Hebrew law in the legal system. So that was his opinion, that instead of us first diving towards the common law and towards the Ottoman law, why don't we first give precedence to the Jewish law, obviously still within the rubric of the secular world we live in today. So that's just a few things to take into consideration and take note on. There could be a separate topic we have, which is what is the state of Israel today, and how Rav Shirky from Brit envisions a halachic state. But I can tell you that it definitely doesn't include coercing people, or people don't have to be nervous about Israel turning into Iran. Very, very far from how at least I and many others interpret that, how that halachic state would look. But let's move onwards. Sandy, can I ask you to read us? Let's start with 1 and 2, if you don't mind.
It is the duty of the leaders of a society to set up a judicial system that will rule with justice. The value of justice was already established at the beginning of the nation of Israel's history. Regarding God choosing Abraham, it was said, in order that he should command his children and his household after him, that they would keep the way of the Lord to practice charity and justice. From Genesis 18:19. Mm-hmm. King Solomon designated doing justice as one of the central functions of the state. With justice, a king will rule the land, from Proverbs 29:4. And the Messiah king will bring about doing justice in the world to perfection, and he will judge among the nations and reprove many nations. And they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and they will not learn war anymore. From Isaiah 2:4.
Right. So, not to be too political, but of course it is quite ironic and even surreal to the quote you just read from Isaiah is etched into the stone and the wall of the UN. And then you also have a case where like Israel is sitting and being judged by this group while the words that are adorning their building are taken from our text, right? So it's this crazy world we live in today. But just like the hearing we had with the 3 Ivy League presidents, I believe that this is also part of the clarification, which at times seems like there's tremendous tension, but I believe ultimately anti-Semitism is not a bug, rather a feature and definitely it intensifies as these clarifications start happening. So it's not a surprise to me that at the same time that I could be talking to a group of lovely Noahides right now, and as that increases and the knowledge of God and the wanting to connect to God increases in the world, so too does hate and vitriol. But things will be okay. With regards to verse number 1, so I would just focus on something that Sandy wrote to me about, again, the fear of leadership today and governments today. I would say what we see from number 1 is we really must find proper leaders. And this has to do with us as a society. Like I'm very upset right now in Israel that after 5 months of war, Israel has yet to, the country has yet to from its midst, we have not seen a leader emerge. And that is quite curious. But we obviously could look at ourselves also as American citizens or Anglo citizens as far as these things are concerned. And what Biden and Trump represent also, I don't think are anything any of us are too proud of. Doesn't matter really where you are with regards to the political divide. It's more about the fact that we are living in leaderless times. So obviously without the proper leadership, much of what we're going to read right now could fall on deaf ears and also can't be executed properly. So it requires also a lot of understanding, a lot of a lot of involvement from our end as well, and that could be from the local level all the way to the larger political arena. But we must have good leaders. With regards to number 2, where we saw these beautiful verses from Solomon and Abraham, it's important to remember that God finds Abraham, right? And he is looking around, and he has to deal with the flood, and he has to deal with other elements and his disappointment in humanity, so to speak. And finally, suddenly, he identifies Abraham. And the reason is, right, not because just he's a good dude, but because he wants to promulgate these ideas onto his children. I have found someone that is not just keeping it within himself, right? He wants to do more with this. He understands the value of these teachings. Now, again, these are not direct teachings that Abraham is getting. Rather, this is inherent understanding from what he's looking around at the world. And God is pointing out and mentioning that Abraham is tapping into a truth over here. And not only is he tapping into it, he wants to pass it on and move it forward in the proper sense. This is things that I mentioned before, but just because we're talking about Abraham, that we had these attempts with Noah and Enoch as well. One was walking beside God, one God was walking before him. Nevertheless, these were unsuccessful. And with Abraham is walking before God. He's not being asked or being told to do something. Rather, there is a surge of energy of justice and chesed and charity that Abraham embodies himself, and he's going out there doing this. And in a certain sense, without being asked by God, right? This is just what he wants. So God, of course, identifies and says, these are the values that I want to promulgate. These are the values that I want to make sure are defining the nation of Israel. And ultimately, all the nations of the world need to be blessed through Abraham. So this is true to all the nations of the world. And of course, we are here right now in our Noahide stream as well. Antonio, if you could pick up 3 and 4.
The generation of the flood had to be destroyed because they lived without justice. As it was said, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with wrongdoing. The laws of the state need to be good and upright. Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed since they judged in courts of injustice.
Right. So in number 3, the word for wrongdoing in Hebrew is Hamas. Again, no political affiliation, but that is the word used in the Bible. And our sages tell us that it was specifically talking about theft in broad daylight, which it's to indicate a complete collapse of society in a certain sense, where everyone's just grabbing and stealing from everyone. And God sees basically that humanity has fully lost control of itself. And that's why there needs to be a reboot, or at the very least, there needs to be an iOS update to how humanity is behaving and the kind of covenant I need to make with them, which later on we see with the covenant of Noah. With regards to number 4, and obviously we need to be good and upright, but the contrast to Sodom and Gomorrah is we are told that Sodom had in its history had a very big fear from Canaan next door. Canaan had many issues. It was very dependent on rain, and they were always nervous that just like the Egyptians had to deal during the famine time with the people of Canaan coming down to them, Sodom didn't want to have to deal with the Canaanites suddenly coming into their borders, right? They wanted to build that wall. They didn't want them to come in and have to be dealing with these refugees. So much so that they also had a law in Sodom, which was that if a beggar comes, you don't give him any food. You only give him money. That's it. That's the only thing you offer him is money. And the people would actually mark their coins, because as this beggar would go around and he would get his dollar here, his dollar there, a day, 2 days, he would end up having a tremendous amount of money with him, but nowhere he could buy it, nowhere he could use that money, and no food. And eventually he would die. The people of Sodom would then come out and collect their money back because it was all marked. They knew off the bat that what they were doing basically is not actually doing charity, because they were not interested in this. And we were told that they were zealously obsessed with the concept of proper measurements, and what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. And they focused on the trivial, and their society eventually became completely corrupt. We are giving examples of they had beds that were a specific size. If you were too tall, they would mush you. If you were too short, they would stretch you. But the attitude is they were stuck in their ways and could not find a way to understand and see the other. So much so that it led to also a complete collapse where they too, this is like a mini flood where they, of course, also have to be destroyed. Here too, we see the tension though with Abraham, which challenges God, right? How is this happening? Because we're saying you're just. How are you doing this? And then there's the famous conversation back and forth where eventually God says, yes, if there was actually a pure core, then they would be saved. Unfortunately, that is not the case here. All right, Jonathan, 5 and 6, if you don't mind.
Included in this mitzvah of just judgment is the duty to teach the people the laws. Lost my place.
Oh, sorry. I jumped to. Sorry, my bad. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Included in this mitzvah of just judgment is the duty to teach the people the laws that Noahides were commanded to keep. It is the obligation of Noahide sages to make statutes and legislate just laws and to make fences according to these laws in order that the world will not be destroyed, to keep society orderly and to enforce said laws.
Right. So number 5 is we are participating in this right now. All of us are participating in this mitzvah as well, which is very exciting. And obviously, the way we spread this is we have to make sure people are aware of this. We have to make sure that these laws are obviously just. We have to teach people. People have to be involved. And like I said, again, this is what we're doing today. And this, of course, has to do also with you yourselves as individuals, your communities. And we're obviously always trying to community build over here, even though this is a marathon. Nevertheless, I believe very strongly in this movement. And that's why spreading this word, again, not necessarily as proselytizing, but more about the way we behave and the way we will be seen behaving, that too will have an effect on the people around us. And again, one could ask, why are we even doing this, right? What are the Jews doing right now out there talking to the Noahides and trying to have this conversation? And obviously, there's been many years that we are away from our homeland, and we were too busy trying to survive. And then the early years of our country over here, we still were constantly fighting for our right to exist. But now it is a time to break out in a certain sense. And as we say in Psalms, to recount his glory among the nations, right? That is something that eventually we're supposed to do, even though if that mission was on a very low flame or in hiatus for a very long time. And it requires from us to recognize who we are and using the wisdom of the prophetic tradition that guides us, right? We have to speak to the world out there. Obviously, stepping up like this means we need to pay attention to what's going on around us. And I would say that's part of, Jacob's and Yosef's and my involvement in the TLC is because this is, for all intents and purposes, where the conversation is happening. So if people are wondering why we're here, this is why. This is not the only reason why we're here, but this is why this movement and this conversation and the opportunity we have to learn these things is so amazing in this day and age. With regards to the fences in number 6, which we spoke about in many times, and we're going to see this also later on when we get to the proper conduct, which is there's a sense where there's a requirement of a recognition of Israel. We spoke about how in Dinim, Noahides throughout the generations really had no counterpart to be speaking to. Now that there's a nation of Israel, there's court systems, there's some sort of relationship that could be had, and a structure could be starting to be built. With regards to these fences, though, we have to be aware that the fences that are being cultivated are culturally appropriate. And we've mentioned this in a few times, how we are not looking to have a carbon copy of everyone being the same. Rather, what's amazing about Judaism, and because I am also a Noahide, I happen to be a Jew as well, but for the world out there, I'm interested in talking to the Canadian Noahide and to the Italian Noahide and to the Asian Noahide, and their fences, while we all, of course, share a specific core, those fences are going to be different by group, right? And we gave once an example how if in Judaism the age of taking on these commandments or them being obligatory start at 13, right? One becomes a man. And we said how maybe in the States right now, I don't know, when we look at like 18-year-olds or even 20-year-olds, we see we're still dealing with people that might be still very immature. So maybe in the States, that would be a different age, right? And that's why we have to be sensitive to the places we're around. If I'm doing this right now if I'm dealing with a Noahide community in Africa where the 13-year-old boy is already hunting, then obviously I'm going to be treating him more maturely, and that's why his status would change based on community.
Can I ask? I don't know if it's a question or a. Sorry, was somebody else going to?
No, by all means.
So the last 4 points, or what you were making, it's interesting because I spoke with a month or so back with my son that's deaf and has autism, the one that has always had a lot of difficulty communicating. I always have talked to him about anything and everything. So I was talking to him about what I was learning here in the Noahide class. Why was I doing it? How did this relate to when I would be interpreting sermons and things for him in church? And like, how does it all fit together, right? So I don't remember our entire conversation, but one of the things that I told him, I went back to talking about Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael, and then about how Isaac had Jacob and Esau, and how, like kind of things because he keeps correcting me on how I sign Jewish. Apparently I don't sign it correctly. But yeah, but what I said to him when I was talking about Abraham and his sons, I was talking about the fact that each father taught his son. So I was saying, so Jacob feels a connection to a Christian ministry that we used to be involved with because it was very hands-on and he helped build some stuff. And he says, well, he likes that. He's looking at me. Am I still allowed to like that? Yeah, you can like that, Jacob. That was a good thing you did there, right? And in our family, sort of the family dynamics and things are an awkward place for me and my boys to talk about because of the past. But what he grabbed out of the entire thing, and what really surprised me because he was paying that much attention, was that he fingerspelled all of the names, Abraham and Ishmael and Isaac, and he fingerspelled all of the names. He's like paying attention to who. And what he reinforced at the end, he goes, but Abraham taught his sons. And when they had children, they taught their sons. And this, out of the whole thing of what I was explaining about church and this and the whole dynamic, that sense of God talks to us and we tell our children, we're passing on our relationship, we're passing on our history, we're passing on our knowledge. That out of the entire thing was what he grabbed hold of and repeated back to me. And he's like, that's fine. It's good because Abraham taught his sons and his son taught their sons. And I'm hearing that in the back of my head while you're reading through the last few points and thinking there's a principle there. Like even where you're saying each different Noahide community will be different just because of who we are. Even in the conversations that I have with my son, I think there's a principle at work there in terms of what it all represents. And I don't know if that's a statement or a question. Is that
it sounds like a statement, but just to clarify that, yes, of course, that while in the ethics of our fathers, we start with Moses received the Torah from Sinai, right? And that's because seemingly we start with being delivered the Torah. Having said that, Abraham, one of the first Noahides, or the first Noahide, so to speak, he is he is very much doing that, right? He is embodying the word we like in this little corner. He's embodying that behavior, right? We see him sitting in the tent with the doors open, welcoming to have people on. So not only is he teaching his sons, he's also embodying that. And of course, that's very, very important for us to see. And we see that with all the patriarchs, that they really rip into their sons. They make sure constantly to remind their sons how to be behaving. The patriarchs also get criticized, right? For example, with Esau and Jacob, we are told, teach the child, teach the son according to his own ways. And the story is that Esau was raised just like Jacob, but that was a very bad fit for Esau. And if we would have taught Esau differently, we might have had a better result, so to speak. But yes, obviously tradition and teaching your kids, and this would be true to all the major religions. That is a very, 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 very powerful component and method to do, which unfortunately people today have. A lot of these traditions get scoffed at today, of course, which is very, very unfortunate. I just see a comment over here. I disagree. Israel now is the biblical Israel. We came from Israel in the Bible, so we are now in our land of Israel. Okay, so this person is very excited. And I'm sorry that I was insulting our devices. I too think Israel is fantastic. I'm Israel Chai. There are legal requirements over here that we have to take into consideration. Yes, so don't take any offense to it. Hopefully next year we'll be feasting together in a rebuilt Jerusalem. 7, it is obligatory to have judges in every district. And this is just a common theme because the Torah wants to make sure everyone is getting their day in court. So we don't want people walking around. We don't want the case prolonged. We don't want people feeling like, I'm not going to go all the way there because it's too much of a hassle. We want to make sure justice is available to all. All right, number 8. The implementation of this mitzvah is the responsibility of the heads of the state, since the government is their heads, and it is not the responsibility of an individual. So this goes back to what we said originally, which was voting matters. Our involvement matters as well, because ultimately the people that are going to be making these decisions are the people in power. And if they're corrupt, then the decisions they make are going to be corrupt as well. And unfortunately, Israel has dealt, when I say Israel, I mean biblical Israel, and unfortunately also modern day Israel has dealt with problematic leaders that we ourselves brought into power. And we should be very careful of that as well. I mean, this goes all the way back to the fact that God is disappointed seemingly where we want to elect a king, right? We're looking around among us, we want a king, and he's sort of almost like offended, saying if they want a king, sure, they could have a king. It's just going to cause trouble. It's going to cause problems. And we see that as well. Hopefully one day we will recognize to see the one true king. That doesn't mean, though, I don't think, though, the political system needs to be separate from religion. I think it can be integrated, and part of the political game can also be sanctified and be religious. Unfortunately, right now, we're not living in those times yet. It is obligatory upon the judges to rule where the first 6 Noahide laws are concerned and to punish those who violate these laws, right? So obviously it's problematic in today's day and age to do all this. Some of this is talking about as we progress, as communities grow, some of these things will become more possible, more feasible as well. 10, it is forbidden for a judge to accept a bribe or to sway a judicial decision with his own prejudices. So this would seem, quite obvious, but obviously we want to take these things very, very seriously. We want to make sure that there's no conflict of interest over here. And we know already that a lot of these systems have been already included into the Western world we live in today and the systems we have today. But we could see already thousands of years ago, or at least 1,000 years ago, many of these things have already been considered by God's infinite wisdom. 11, it is forbidden to carry out punishment before the accused stands trial. So this also makes sense. What would be interesting, as I read this right now, would be what does AI, how AI will affect this. And by that I mean, there was, I forgot the name of his partner, but Tristan and his friend from, I don't know if you guys ever saw that the social dilemma. But recently they also came out talking about the most novel advancements in AI, and they were showing how you could use AI today to decode what the brainwaves are saying, so to speak, and by looking at someone's eyes and micro expressions, I could know what he did or didn't do or what he's thinking. So a question would be, sort of a pre-crime minority report, right? Is that something that's going to be possible? And then how does a commandment like this, a law like this, how would this still be relevant, right? Can we decide that this person is guilty based on the conclusion of a AI? I need to shoot that up the ladder to people that are more skilled than me with deciphering or understanding these things. But I think that could potentially be problematic. There's definitely something right now to say that even if you are quite sure, nevertheless, you want to make sure that everyone gets their day in court. Antonio, can you take us on 12 and 13?
It is forbidden to delay judgment, that is, to lengthen the judicial process, the handing down of a verdict, and administering any sentence in the absence of a legitimate reason for doing so. In our time, states do not set up courts obligated to pass judgment in accordance with Noahide law. However, it is possible in most states to set up an independent court according to the rules of arbitration and within the laws or limits of the law. In the case of a lawsuit, it is desirable to suggest arbitration before a Noahide court that will be set up for this purpose and will be in session either on a regular basis or whenever the need arises.
Okay, so number 12, the ethics of our father talk about this quite often with the issues with prolonging judgment. And this also relates back to what we said about having a judge in every town, right? We want to make sure it's accessible. We want to make sure this process can move. Ethics of our father discusses how places, the nation, the town that is prolonging justice or has a corrupt system, then it uses the terminology that then the wild animals attack. And it doesn't necessarily mean that beasts come and attack us. Rather, just like in Daniel's dream, the other nations, the outer forces of the world, once you have a system that is completely corrupt and is failing, then you are exposed to be attacked by other outside forces. It also talks about how from an interior perspective, that there's going to be a disintegration of society if you don't manage to have proper systems that allow you to move things along fairly quickly. Of course, we're not trying to rush judgment, but we can't just be prolonging things for multiple years. And the ramifications to this or the solutions to this are more budgeting, more judges, more court systems. But the answer just isn't just like, well, we'll just have to wait 17 years until we have like a verdict. And obviously we all know, or we all have heard horrible stories about verdicts that have been prolonged, even if whether it's someone accused wrongfully or someone that only after like 10 years finally gets his day in court. And then, yes, he's seen guilty, but what about those 10 years that he lost? So, of course, we have to take these things very, very seriously. With regards to 13 and these arbitration and so we have rabbinic courts in Israel. There's Batei Din. There's discussions in Israel whether there are some that look at the whole the legal system in Israel as being run by star worshipers, and that's why we're not interested in them. However, many in the modern Orthodox community see that ideally, if you could take monetary issues to the rabbinical courts, but anything that's criminal issues, things like that, they could go to the legal systems. We've spoke about this before about dina de malchuta dina, which is you are accepting the law of the land, and there is a halachic status of accepting the law of the land as well. So that is a reason why many like me look at the court systems we have today and could still see them as halachically and legally binding, on both from the civil perspective and from the religious perspective. Having said that, in many religious communities, observant communities, we do try to take domestic issues, monetary issues, and take them to the religious courts, the Batei Din. And the attitude is here where it's not as prolonged. We want to try to maintain friendship, right? We don't want to be put into a system that ultimately is built to cause division, strife. Our lawyers are going to be telling us, you got to attack him this way. I'd much rather be at a rabbi and say, whatever you say, I'll accept. I just know that you're looking at this from a halachic, moral, ethical decision, and it's the same compass I'm using as well. With regards to the Noahides, obviously right now this is just a general statement, right? Jonathan can't go to his community and be like, I would like an arbitration of a whole system just for me. Having said that, and not to sound like a broken record, this is why cultivation of community is key, right? Summer camps, schools, communities, where you can get to a critical mass where you can now say, okay, we want to have our own little system, which allows us to solve these things internally with our own system without creating division inside the community. And this obviously is something that hopefully one day will become more relevant and more possible as these communities grow. 14, the court will be authorized to punish and even administer the death penalty for those who violate the 7 Noahide laws, according to the considerations of the judge. So obviously, this is not relevant now at all. There's a discussion in Jewish law, the capital punishment. There's stoning, there's fire, there's decapitation. There's one other, and with regards to Noahide law, usually it's just decapitation by sword. There are some that say that depending on what happens on adultery or things like that, there could also be stoning. Regardless, none of these things are that we practice today anymore. And definitely with regards to 14, I wouldn't tell anyone to take it too seriously. Not that it's not halakha and it's not serious, rather that obviously this will manifest very differently once there are systems and courts that could actually accommodate this. And this would only be if this relates to number 15, which is the death penalty should only be administered in cases where the violation of the Noahide law was clearly intentional. But as we are taught in the Talmud, that a court system that would sentence to death someone once every 70 years was considered a violent court system. So the system ultimately, the Jewish halakha, bends over backwards to avoid putting someone to death. He wasn't saying he couldn't know it was a Monday. There's 1,001 loopholes how we make sure these things don't happen, because while we have that in our arsenal, this is not something that we are trying to do. This relates a little to where you could see some of the Jewish law in the Israeli law, which is there are some laws. One of them that relates to this is a thief who wants to repent and shows honest remorse. So we incorporate into our legal system some sort of understanding for this person, and to potentially even work out a deal with him where he doesn't have to do actually any jail time if we actually see that he's doing so. And this is being derived from the Torah as well. So we hope also with regards to death penalty, we could see in Israel it was only used once with Eichmann. There is talk now of reusing it because of October 7th. Obviously in the States, there are some, and I wouldn't know which states that I still practice this kind of death penalty, but generally speaking, I think it's quite rare, even in the States, that this is done today. I think we decided as a society that this is no longer moral. Obviously, we go by the morality of the Torah, but we are sensitive to the people around us. No punishment should be administered in the case where someone was forced to violate the Noahide law, right? So quite obvious, and we spoke about this also with regards to idol worship and things like that. If someone's putting a gun to your head and making you do this, then both God and the judge, of course, understand this, and are very sensitive to this. Whoever thinks, number 17, whoever thinks that it is permissible to murder or to have relations with someone else's wife is not considered an intentional violator of the associated law, but as an intentional violator. So in other chapters, we spoke about how if I didn't know, right, the Torah says, okay, maybe you didn't know, so we could understand you. Here we're saying, you could try to pull that excuse with God ultimately, but us as a society, we don't think you didn't know that it's not okay to sleep with your friend's wife, and we don't think you didn't know that it's not okay to murder. Like, it's like, open up your eyes and see where you are around you. So we cannot accept ignorance in such extreme cases, right? God will be the one that judges ultimately, but we as a society need to say, no, the buck stops over here. We can't assume that you don't know what we're talking about, which also is quite clear. Number 18. Jonathan, you want to take 18 and 19?
It is possible to rely on a verdict handed down against a Noahide, even if there is only one witness, and that witness is a relative of the accused, and even if there is only one judge ruling in the case. A woman may not be either a judge or a witness in capital crimes. If there is agreement between the sides to judge the case before an arbitrator, then a woman may be either a judge or a witness.
Okay, so before we get into proper conduct, as far as 18, in Judaism, you do require two witnesses, and they can't be related to you. We see, and this is a general trend we see with the Noahide, by the letter of the law, there's more leniency. However, once we get into proper conduct and the fences that we spoke about earlier, we see that that's not really going to fly. So could you say that in a certain case, if a judge has to, he could accept this? Yes. But there's a sense where you want to avoid a conflict of interest and things like that. So if you're making fences and you're trying to, and you want to take on the proper conduct, ultimately you're going to end up back in a more stringent, strict system, which does require two witnesses and does require, and does prohibit it being a family member for obvious reasons. With regards to 19, first of all, you could see already in 19 at the latter end, we see over here that there's already an adjustment, right? Which is, if there's an agreement, then this could be happening. I would say we could read into this to see where society at, right? So if as a society we agree to this, then clearly we're in a place right now where we feel comfortable where a woman is a judge or is a witness. I should just mention that there's obviously a tension over here built in, because we are famously know about the judge Devorah, right? Deborah with Barak, and that is a biblical figure. However, the people who are opposed women being judges would come and say that she was, we're talking about a very unique case with someone that is, considered a prophet, has the Shekhinah running through her. So that is someone very, very specific, but we can't use it as an example for all women. Generally speaking, the reason the Torah is making this division is not because women can't think, and not because women are not as qualified to be judges as men. Rather, just like there are priests, there are Levites, there are Israelites, there are women, there are men, there are different positions and different jobs and different orientations that people have. And the Torah looks at women being more pure. And in that sense, why would you want to be dealing with murder, rape, horrible things that society deals with? So if you're dealing with like monetary things, one thing, but if you're dealing with now with more heinous stuff, perhaps this is not a place for a woman. I understand that could be seen as a much more traditional or conservative take. There are exceptions, even in halakha, there are exceptions to the rule, but this is the general rule. Again, I would stress what we see over here in 19, which is if there's an agreement between the sides, again, if it's a society, if it's a community, we decide that we do think that Sandy could be this judge, then you're in a place where you should feel comfortable to move and feel confident that is a proper decision. It's more about, again, is this something that we want to be having forced on us top down? Sandy, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, question. Did you say that's I'm looking up what capital crime means. So I'm kind of reading that and going, did you say that is the same or different in Judaism?
Different. A woman may not be either a judge or witness in capital crimes. Okay.
Oh,
Then in monetary crimes, there are in monetary issues, there are exceptions in halakha that say, because this is not as intense as capital issues that we're dealing with over here, or criminal issues that we're dealing over here, such as, like, again, terrorism, rape, death.
Right. You said women cannot be witnesses in that case?
Yes, women cannot be witnesses in that case. Also, there are exceptions. That's the general rule.
I'll have questions for you later.
Sure. That is completely appropriate to ask questions about that. There are no answers. No, I'm joking. You're completely fine. Feel free to ask me anything you'd like. Okay. Proper conduct, and our timing is good. Okay. So these are quite self-explanatory. And again, you'll excuse me if this week and 2 weeks ago, these topics are a little more dry. Number 20, the judge will not hear the arguments of one side unless the other side is present. So one, we said, of course, you need to be in court. Second of all, we want to make sure that no one feels like, I walk into court like 10 minutes later, court already started, and I feel like I didn't know what they said. I'm already out of the loop. There's nowhere I'm gonna win this. We want both sides to feel like they were seen fairly and had their day in the sun. 21, the judge will not judge his relatives or those who hate him. Okay, so this goes back to our creating fences over here. Quite obvious why we'd want to do this as well. The judge will, number 22, the judge will not accept testimony from an evildoer. So here, even though it seems quite obvious, okay, obviously we like some crazy maniac that's an evildoer, we don't want to be taking his advice. Having said that, evildoer could also mean in halakha one who violates the law. Right, I'm not keeping the Sabbath. I am eating unkosher food. Then you find yourself in a problem right now, because so suddenly, while this person doesn't have an evil heart, suddenly there's many people, or you would ask today in Israel, how am I doing this? Right, there's many secular people living in Israel. Are all these people disqualified? So in today, we see many of the secular people in Israel not as intentional transgressors. Right? They don't know what they do. There is an ignorance, so to speak, and this is not speaking down to them. It doesn't mean that they're not aware that their lineage is Jewish and there's something called halakha. Rather, they were not raised in a system which has them value that or understand how important those things are. And because they don't understand that, right? There's an issue for example, halachically, to drink wine from someone who does not observe. Definitely from a non-Jew, because there's issues. What if this wine was used for idol worship and you can't know, so you don't drink from this wine? Then people came and said you can't drink wine from someone who violates the Sabbath. However, in Israel today, people have a much more lenient take on that today, because we know that this transgressor isn't necessarily someone that is doing this because he hates God or he hates the Shabbat, or he's trying to bring in some sort of idol worship. Rather, it's just something that he's not doing. So while number 22 is, again, of course, relevant, in today's day and age, there are tweaks and adjustments that need to be done to the category of evildoer and who falls under that category. Number 23, judgment should not be rendered by a single judge. Here, of course, there are, even in Judaism, there are some exceptions to this. Having said that, we don't want someone stuck in their own echo chamber. Once we discuss things, and this is obviously something we see in the TLC all the time, these long form and large form discussions ultimately allow us to, while they could be messy and confusing, the good ones allow us to derive to some truth where we picked up from all the little bits of people that were talking. And if I come in just myself, I could ultimately be getting very confused. I could think I know what I'm talking about when I actually don't know where I'm talking about. I might have reached my limits of my cognitive abilities, and now I'm stuck sort of at that level. So having someone else helping me phase shift, or at least two other people having like a quorum of three, that allows us to get to a more pure version of the truth. Number 24, judgment will be rendered according to a majority decision, right? So majority rule, again, to clarify, Judaism is a Jewish state that decided to take on a democratic system. One of them is also majority rule. It's not that the democracy is what's on top, as Jonathan Peugeot was talking about. It's Judaism on top, which is deciding to play the game of democracy, and also thinking of game theory is designed to take on that the majority decision. We go by according to majority decision. Of course, there are some. There is variation over there and some nuance there, but that's the general rule. No judge will sit in judgment after drinking an intoxicating beverage, right? So this is quite obvious, of course, but unfortunately we have plenty of cases where he shouldn't have been driving, he shouldn't have been judging, he shouldn't have been teaching. Generally speaking, people should feel very careful with how they partake. Now, you could ask, we're in a society in Denver right now, or in Colorado, right? These things are illegal, or many things are illegal. And if it's also legal, if we get to a place where we say, because right now, if I take my mushrooms, I'm not going to get arrested in Colorado, but they're going to say you can't operate heavy machinery, right? They're going to be like, okay. If we get to a place where, as a society, where this is permissible, is the intoxicating drink or the intoxicating joint, is it intoxicating or not? So like we have to ask ourselves, like, what are these based on norms, or are these based on what the actual effect would be? So I would say, even though these things might be becoming a lot more prevalent and a lot more legal, this is actually where you have to be extra cautious, where the judge might be like, yeah, well, I just took one gummy. Like, if you're right now, your robes are on and you're functioning as the judge, you really need to make sure you are, as far as you're concerned, this is the heaviest machinery you're operating, right? So you have to take that you have to do this so very, very cautiously. Number 26, no preferential treatment will be afforded to either litigant, right? So obviously we have this today, and we're even in attitude, by the way, like the judge walks in and gives like a big smile to one and just like a cold nod to the other. That could send shivers down one of the side spine, right? Like, what is that? He's going to start reading into the smile, and maybe it doesn't mean anything, but the judge has to realize that he's being looked at and he's being judged and his interactions are being judged. So you really want to walk in as impartial as possible, so no one feels that we don't want someone to give up before the hearings even start. And the warm hello that the judge gives, or the fact that he sees the judge outside, like saying hi to the person beforehand, that could obviously scare one of the sides. So you have to be very, very careful about that. There is to be a comprehensive examination and questioning of the witnesses. And this is, even if one of the sides, we're sure like this is the most innocent person, we must get to the truth, which is God's name. So we're going to ask, we're going to dig, we're going to flip every rock. We must get to the truth. So even if it's uncomfortable to both sides, nevertheless, this still has to happen. We have to confirm all the details that are available to us. Number 29, a judgment should not be rendered according to the testimony of one single witness alone. So even earlier we read about how the Noahide, according to the letter of the law, can do this. Nevertheless, the proper conduct is letting us know that this is not the proper behavior. The judge has to assume that God himself is in the courtroom watching. And if that's the case, it is a mistake to bring in a single witness. You really want to make sure that you're showing yourself, the participants, and God that you are doing this. You are doing your due diligence. You're taking this seriously because you want to manifest truth at the end of the day. So even though you could do so with one witness, you should do so alone. And lastly, 30, judgments are not only to be rendered after careful judgments are only to be rendered after careful deliberation and based on profound understanding of the law. So I would say that the while this seems quite obvious, the fact that it's based on profound understanding of the law, and I'm going to use this also with regards to not only as a judge, but also as a public figure. And thinking again about Biden and Trump in this case, which with regards to, let's say, their age. There's a sense when you look at these leaders and you have to ask yourself, like, how do you have a profound understanding of the system you're dealing with and the power you're wielding? And it doesn't mean like, oh, then only a 30-year-old could do this. But we have to ask ourselves whether, and I don't know if any of you had a teacher where you realize at some point where this teacher is no longer up to date with what's happening, right? So we have to be very, very careful, again, to the people that lead us. Are they actually involved? We want the person that is reading the new texts, understands the new science, is aware of the new developments that could actually constantly be leading us and orienting us towards truth and justice. And if we have people that are stuck in some other time with a different mindset and a different understanding with how the system works, we are destined to fail in that regard. So I realize now I'm not ending on an inspiring note, but please God, we will all elect proper leaders from our own communities and from our surroundings will emerge and want to take on such a responsibility, hopefully doing so with the proper understanding of halakha, rules, and the people around them as well. Any questions, comments, disses?
My takeaway is women aren't allowed to be witnesses.
Your general question is why women are not allowed to be witnesses?
I was just reminding. I know Sandy had a question about it.
I'll ask Green.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Jonathan was offended. I will dive into that on the top of next week's lesson. I'll dive into that a little about why women can't be witnesses. Again, having said that, there are exceptions to this. We also have to take into consideration the slow evolving process of halakha, right? So this is something that may change, but I'll get into this a little more in depth next week. Thank you all for joining. Sorry, Stan, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was going to say not on that simple level. I have a couple of deep questions that I'll write you about or something. Or
please, what you wrote to me earlier about your question about governance and law. I hope you could see over here. The focus is the proper leaders, right? It's not so difficult to spell out how to behave. The question is, can we find the people that actually could step up to the plate and live up to such a responsibility? And I believe the answer is yes. Unfortunately, those are far and few between. But going back to Abraham, if we raise our children in that way, and we make sure to instill these traditions, these concepts, these ideas in them, both intellectually and embodied, then hopefully as a society, we could build a much more robust, just, and truthful society as well. All right. With that, I bid you adieu, and I will catch you all next week. Sandy, please feel free to send any question you have, and that's true to anyone else here.
Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. And I might ask for a conversation.
Of course.
If that's all right. All right.
Catch you all later. Have a great week.
You too.
Bye.
Boom. Pow. Pow. Very nice. Okay. Some comments. Lynn. Hello. Just checking in, listening. I hope you enjoyed. And I hope you are doing well as well. There was a women's stream with Paul Vanderklay. Perhaps next time you'll join. Yosef, you're working. I understand. Hopefully I'll catch you on the flip side. Goodbye, everyone. Take care. All right, Sandy, I see you're, yeah, hanging up.